Today is really gorgeous outside behind you guys.
And it's warmer today.
Yesterday, isn't it funny that you wake up and I was like 61 and I was like, that's freezing.
Compared. Do a Michigan winter right now. I would literally freeze. I don't know. Just see. I wish I could be part of that swirl.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning.
Bring it back. Good morning. We are here today with a follow-up video for those of you who watched yesterday for our entomology video with our insect expert, Alex.
And this is Alyssa,
Yes.
who's also
Hello.
going to be helping me today.
So we just wanted to answer a couple of questions that you guys might have had or that we get a lot when we teach that class.
All right, to start us off, Alyssa, could you tell us, as a South Carolina girl, what the state insect is?
Yes, the state insect is the Carolina mantis, so praying mantis. And that's one thing I really wanted to see while I've been here at Barrier Island, and I've actually not seen a Carolina mantis in the wild. So there's still a couple weeks left for me to hopefully see one of those. I have, however, seen the state butterfly several times while I've been here, which is the eastern tiger swallowtail, which is a really pretty black butterfly with yellow markings. So that's pretty cool.
Since we're talking about insects, like we are going to be the entire video, Alex, could you tell us about how insects breathe? I know we didn't get to talk about that yesterday.
Yeah, that's something that I happened to skip over yesterday. But insects don't actually have lungs like you and I do. And so how they breathe is they have tiny little holes or openings that run through the top of their body. And then through those holes, there is tubing that's called tracheae. And those tubings start branching out and make a network that go through their body so that oxygen gets to every part of their body. And this is actually a really neat way for the insect to be continually moving like it has to search for food or find shelter and whatnot. Because when humans continually move all the time or exercise a lot, we have something called lactic acid that builds up and it causes our muscles to tire out and get really sore. But by this whole system of how the insects breathe, so the oxygen coming in through the spiracles and going through the tracheae and going through every part of the body, there's no lactic acid that builds up. So insects are really well adapted to be able to move constantly like they need to.
Okay.
I did not know that. I just learned that.
Very
cool.
Why do fireflies, or lightning bugs as some of us call them, light up, Alyssa?
Oh, yes, I know. I like that you call them lightning bugs, because I know that people call them fireflies, but in my mind, they'll always be lightning bugs. And so lightning bugs will flash or light up to communicate with one another. And actually, different species of lightning bugs have different patterns of flashes and light that they use to identify themselves to one another. Some species of lightning bugs will actually flash the signal of another species of lightning bug to attract that lightning bug, and then they eat that lightning bug, which is pretty cool. So that's one way that they get their food. But it's also a very important way for them to attract mates. So they'll kind of be doing a flashing dance with their lights, and the female lightning bugs will be like, wow, he's so good at flashing his lights. I think that that's going to be my firefly boyfriend. So I used to love, when I was little, that was one of my favorite things, was just as the sun was setting to go out to a big open space and catch lightning bugs. I say I used to love that. I still love that. It's still one of my favorite things to do. So
Absolutely.
And along those lines, since we're talking about our childhoods a little bit, Alex, you said you had a story you wanted to share with us about an ant?
Yeah, so this is a study that was actually done, which is why if you're really interested in insects, you should continue following that passion, because there's a lot of things you can study about insects. They're so unique. It just depends on what you want to actually study. But this study was looking into how ants take care of their dead. And so what would happen is ants actually will, when they die, their body releases a chemical called oleic acid. And it lets the other living ants know that this dead body can be carried away to the graveyard. Because ants actually have a graveyard for their dead, which is kind of cool that ants would take the time to take care of their own. And so they would carry them to the graveyard. And so the test was to see if they would do that with a live ant that had oleic acid put on it. And so the scientists put some of this acid, or some of this chemical, on top of a living ant and waited to see what would happen. And so the living ants came around to the ant that had the chemical on it, and they started carrying it to the graveyard, even though the ant that had this chemical on it was still alive and still moving. So everything was aware that it was still moving, but they carried it to the graveyard. And the most interesting part about this is that the ant that had the chemical put on it thought that it was dead as well because it had this chemical on it. And so it stayed in the graveyard until the chemical wore off. And then it suddenly realized that it was actually alive and rejoined the colony. So I just think that that's such an odd thing to happen. I know there's another study that they were doing because ants, in order to communicate with one another, they will count out steps to certain locations. So if one ant finds food, they'll let the other ants know that it takes 100 steps to get to that spot. So what they did is they fashioned these little stilts to put ants on, these little tiny stilts, and they allowed this one ant to go find some food and reported back to everyone else how many steps it took. But because this ant was on stilts, it took them less steps to get to the location. But for the regular ants who didn't have those stilts, they counted out 100 steps and did not find the food because it was a different distance. So there's just a lot of little weird things about ants in particular, because we study those a lot. But a lot of cool things you can learn about insects if you just take the time to.
That's cool. That explains, that first story explains why I've had students ask me before about zombie ants.
Yes.
And this makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
That's what that means, is basically an ant that comes back to life.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. We have a question that's been asked, and if y'all don't mind, I'm going to answer this one. The question is, are there illnesses besides malaria that insects can spread? And the answer is yes. Mosquitoes have been responsible not only for malaria, but yellow fever, Zika, the Zika virus. That was a big deal a few years ago. Then you have things like fleas, and they were responsible for the plague, and they can transmit typhus along with trench fever. And then we have lice, and lice too. And then you have ticks, and ticks are a little bit different. But yes, there are many other diseases that insects can spread.
Lyme disease.
Yeah, Lyme disease with ticks.
Cool. I think that might be all that we have that we're addressing today. And it is Friday, so we do have a couple of days until our next scheduled video. Next week is actually going to be the last week of the Barrier Island live video team, just because our scheduled season is coming to an end. So please be sure to join us for that last week. It's going to be really special, and we have really appreciated everybody tuning in and watching with us and asking questions. It makes us feel like we're still teaching a little bit, even in these weird times. So tune in next Tuesday at 11. Abigail, do you know what our scheduled video is supposed to be?
I do not remember what's on Tuesday. I know that next Thursday is orienteering, which is our compass, our navigating class. But the schedule will be posted for those probably in about the next 30 minutes. So you'll be able to look and see what classes we're going to be teaching next week.
Perfect. All right, thanks guys.